Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 657 for the 16th of May 2021. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. A cold snap. I wonder why they call it a cold snap. Snap frozen? Something like that. Apart from that, it's a very sunny day. Maybe this is the kind of day which would be nice to wander around the city parks and look at lovely autumn trees. See the odd bit of lavender here and there, maybe. You can dress nice and warmly in a purple top or something like that. But before you do all that, you might want to listen to the Skeptic Zone, or you could listen to the Skeptic Zone while you're doing all that. Coming up on this week's show, Maynard is back with an interview. Maynard interviews Dr Sathana Dushyanthen from Melbourne University. And she is involved with cancer research and looking at COVID-19 myths and myth conceptions. And she's also taking part in the Pint of Science series. Hear about the cancer, misconceptions, COVID-19 myths coming up with Maynard at the top of the show. Following that, it's a report from the United States where the Federal Trade Commission is taking action also against COVID-19. Dodgy products being sold and the law coming down like a ton of bricks. Then we have the return of the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. Now, I went round to Tim's place the other day to record a whole series of the Book of Tim, and we took the opportunity to have a talk about what's coming up in the next issue of the Skeptic magazine, the journal from Australian skeptics, and we sort of just go off on weird sort of skeptical tangents. So a chat with Tim Mendham a bit later on the show. Then to round everything off, we have another look into the digitised archives of newspapers, and this time we're looking for references to alien abductions. And we also read about the Heaven's Gate cult. That's all from me at the moment. It's time for me to run downstairs, get some coffee and toast. Toast with cheese. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, Pint of Science has got some important stuff coming up in the near future with a real star case that's going to be doing something there. We've got Sathana Dushyanthen, Dr Sathana Dushyanthen on the line. How are you?
Good, thank you guys. How are you? Thanks very much for having me on the show.
Oh, look, it's great to have you on the show. I'll just look, you're a graduate program lead, you're an online teaching and educational specialist. Does that mean you don't like having people in front of you? You like doing it online, the people in the room annoy you when you try and teach them?
Not at all. I actually really enjoy face-to-face teaching, but it's turned out well in the COVID era where everything's become online. But I think online is really the way of the future, especially with short attention spans and really busy people.
Oh, look, a research capstone coordinator, master of cancer sciences. That's a big one. I don't understand the word capstone because I'm not really a tertiary education person. Does that mean you guide it in some way? What does that mean?
Yeah, so capstone is an overarching term, I guess, which is used a lot when it's like the main piece that students have to pass to get their master's degree. So it's like a 6-month research project that they undertake in an area of interest. And it's actually also done online.
No. And where did you get your degree and why did you end up specialising in the area you do now and being a science communicator as well?
I've studied in a couple of different places. I guess I did my undergraduate at Monash and I was doing biomedical science there. And it was kind of in my third year where they really introduced us to research. And I was just fascinated by how sort of innovative it was, and also how it was also trying to discover something that we didn't already know. And so that idea of not knowing something and learning about something new was really exciting to me. But then I went on to do my master's and my PhD at the University of Melbourne because I guess you hear that they have great research programs, and they had a great program for cancer research.
Look, with your work at the Victorian Comprehensive Cancer Centre, you must come across all sorts of wild theories. And look, you've spent a lot of time in this area. You obviously know a lot through your research. What is the thing that really, grinds your gears, I believe is a technical term that people use for it in the academia? What's the one thing when you see it and it's wrong and you go, what's the one thing every time? Or are you naturally a very peaceful person?
I'd like to think I'm naturally a level-headed person. I don't know about peaceful. I think people talk about cures a lot, and I don't know if that's the correct terminology because I'm not sure that we have found a cure yet. And I feel like cancer is one of those diseases that's constantly evolving and changing. And so when we say cure, I think we're kind of misleading people a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that there's anything that really upsets me about what people say, because I think you have to take it with the understanding that they're coming from a place of not understanding the research. And if you take the time to explain it to them, then, maybe they'll come around to what they're thinking.
Well, here's a direct COVID conspiracy that I was watching myself on a YouTube video the other day, and it was saying that the COVID virus has receptors on it that are also in HIV, so this could not occur naturally and had to be made in a lab. Now, is there anything in that at all? Is there anything in that sentence that's even correct?
No, I don't think so, no.
But then they had the woman from who made the movie Plandemic come on and explain it. She said, well, this couldn't even evolve in 800 years and it's done it in less than 10. Aha, is what she said.
Sounds very similar to the situation where the guy who used to work at Pfizer came up with the misinformation that it causes fertility issues. And there was no basis for it. But because of where he worked and what he was, it became like a huge viral cycle. And and now it's one of the things that we're constantly having to address is whether the fear that people think that the COVID vaccine causes fertility issues when it actually doesn't.
Well, yeah, it's the case that it hasn't been tested for that because that hasn't been done yet. Is that the reason?
Well, no, I mean, like they've looked into the science and so they're saying, there's the protein on the spike protein in the coronavirus, which is the same as a protein that's involved in placental development. But like the sequence that they share is very, very small. And so there's no way that those things can interact at all. But, it's like these little inklings of truth that then get blown out and then completely change, I think, the narrative and make it into something that it's not.
And it's the old one about a lie can get around the world 10 times before the truth has had a chance to get its pants or its hat on. And that's the case, because for you to explain that, you're going to have to take about 4 times longer than the person who just mentioned it. Hey, yeah, the HIV thing, the COVID, yeah, woo, look out. And then you've got to go, well, really? And the person's probably gone.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, when you put out a video or any article, you've got to reference about 100 sources, right? Just to cover all your bases. And especially with something that's so current, there's research coming out pretty much, every hour of every day. So it's impossible to stay across all of the content. But yeah, you try your best.
And with the vaccine that's becoming available, I've booked in to have it in about a month's time. I'm getting it. I was speaking to someone yesterday and they said, I probably won't get it. And their reason for not getting the vaccine was there's not a lot of COVID around, they didn't think.
Oh, okay.
And that's a tough one to argue with because I can't, well, here's 3 people standing next to me now that have COVID. Meet them. Yes, if it hasn't personally touched you, a lot of people might not get it.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for a lot of things, but I don't think the answer is that simple. I mean, the reason we have no COVID is because our borders are completely shut to everyone, right? But
funny that might be one reason why it's not around.
Yeah, right. But at some stage, we need to open up and normalize again. And when that happens, there's a lot of COVID around the world, and we are vulnerable to that. Like, for example, there was a plane that was coming here with the reparation citizens from India, and I think 50 out of the 170 had COVID and they can't travel now. So, it's coming in on flights, even if it's in quarantine. Quarantine has leaks and we're always going to be vulnerable, I think. And there's no way for this pandemic to end unless we get like 80% herd immunity, and that requires people to get vaccinated.
What's the biggest myth that's out there, or the biggest COVID conspiracy that you think is the most dangerous?
I'll give you two. One is the most ridiculous one that I've heard, which is the 5G and the phone towers and masks having, wires in them, and the vaccine being microchipped, and, Bill Gates is involved. That's probably the most ridiculous. I think the most dangerous one is the one where people think it's going to alter their DNA. And there's absolutely no truth to this. And, these kinds of vaccines have been tested and used for a very long time. And just, I think the fact that, it's called a mRNA or a DNA-based vaccine gets people worried, and that's fair enough. But I think they also need to listen to the experts when they say that it does not affect your DNA. And maybe that will be something that happens over time once people see that, more and more people are taking it and it gets socialized, and then it becomes a case of, you're opting out and that vaccination is the norm. But yeah, I think right now that's probably one of the biggest hesitancies, is that people think it was rushed and made too quickly and that it affects your DNA in some way.
Do you think people, it's the word STEM, but in a different way, do you think this sort of thinking stems from the fact that people are suspicious of big business? So it's not so much initially anti-science, it's anti-greedy capitalists. And so by guilt by association, they think, they're just trying to make money, so they're fudging the science.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And I think, through history, I think pharmaceutical companies have had that sort of view of them, is that, they're out to make money and they're money-making machines. But I think the difference with this is, we're in a pandemic, and they've been very open and transparent about their findings. They've been transparent about what kind of profits they're making, and how a lot of it is, they're not making money. They're doing it, wholesale, I guess. And so I think people need to kind of be a little bit more accepting of the fact that, yes, this may have been the case in the past, but then there are good intentions here, because it's a global problem, and, nobody can go back to normal until it is fixed.
And why do you think Bill Gates cops it so much? Is it because he's a really rich guy and he's not really a doctor, and that's why people criticise him, or they're just jealous of his money?
I don't know, actually, but I would say that it's because he's had so much involvement in science, especially in, the malaria space and vaccination. He's got these programs for innovation and that kind of thing. And so he's kind of in that space, and he does have a lot of money, which means that he can push agendas and he can kind of control what happens. And so I think that's where people's hesitation might come from. But, at the end of the day, he is a kind of philanthropist, I guess, and he's trying to do good things. So it just depends on which way you look at it.
And for a final question here, what's something we can all take away from people who have out there theories and things that don't fit in with the science? What's the way we can perhaps, when we meet these people or they argue with us online, what's the best way to go about this and help rather than hinder? Sometimes I think the best thing to do, before you push send on anything on social media, I always think, will they thank me for this? Will anyone thank me for this? And the answer is usually no, so I just don't do anything. But that's just me.
I think like one of the worst places that this kind of misinformation is spreading is sort of through WhatsApp and, these closed groups. And there's these crazy chains going around which have no resources to them and like no verification, but people keep on sending it forward. So I think people need to stop and think about what they're doing and what effect that is going to have on the multiple people that then go on to forward to, exponential amounts of people that they know. Like the only way you can stop it is if you stop it, and then that chain is broken. And I think that is sort of the only way, because this is such a big issue. It starts with you, I think. So think about what it is saying and what where the sources are coming from and whether you really believe it to be true, and maybe go and fact check yourself before you forward something on.
But also, before you say something, make sure you've got the facts. Don't just go off half-cocked like I do. I just go, no, it's not. And then I go, oh, dear, I shouldn't have said that.
And I think saying I don't know is okay. I think people feel like they have to have all the answers, but nobody has all the answers.
I can't believe how you're so not angry about this. Like I said earlier, with what you've done and what you know, and you see the sort of rubbish that's on social media, I don't know why you aren't just fist bumping the air and being angry, but you've got a big smile on your face and you're going, you can educate people. And I'm bloody hell. You're good. You've got an inner calm that I have not got. See, I'm getting angry now, and I'm not even talking to someone who's disagreeing with me.
Yeah, I don't know. Getting angry doesn't do anything, right? You can't reach those people and nothing will change. So it's small changes, one at a time, starting with the people you know, because you trust the people you know, right? And then hopefully they can amplify that signal.
And what will you be doing at Pint of Science?
I'm not sure yet, actually, but Pint of Science is a great program and I've been involved for a couple of years. So I'm pretty excited to watch and see what other people get up to.
Cool. And we look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you very much for your time today. I hope I've asked some questions that are vaguely interesting.
Yeah, thank you, guys. It's really an honour and a pleasure to be a part of the program.
Oh, look! It's great to have someone.
I hope it was interesting.
Well, look, it's good to have someone on who knows what they're talking about. I mean, Richard normally has to have me on.
Thank you for talking to me on a Friday evening.
You told me that aliens really exist. You met them and swooned with.
Sziasztok!
Hallå!
Hejsan hejsan! Did you know the European continent is home to almost 750 million people living in 50 different countries, belonging to an even greater number of ethnicities?
And believe it or not, only a handful of them list English as the first or at least one of the official languages.
And there's an amazing amount of skeptical activism going on out there that you are not aware of because it's not in English.
Yeah, because you know, pseudoscience, quackery and fake news do not stop at borders. They get translated to other languages and transferred across the whole world.
So, if you're interested in weekly updates on what's going on in some of the countries here, providing you with all the interesting facts, news and even some skeptical history,
Or if you want to hear interviews in English with brilliant people you sometimes haven't even heard about,
then what you need is to subscribe to the ESP.
extrasensory perception. You must be really wrong.
no, the ESP as in
The European Skeptics Podcast.
That's right. And if you're wondering how you can find us online, go to theesp.eu.
And you can also find us on Twitter at espodcast_EU, or you can like us on Facebook.
And if you want to subscribe, do a quick search on all the intertubes for the European Skeptics Podcast. You'll find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify and all the rest.
The European Skeptics Podcast.
The real ESP experience.
I don't know how you can believe.
Now, last week on the show, you would have heard me reading out the complaint made by Ken MacLeod against a so-called midwife who was resigning out of frustration and pleading, or even more, being very forthright about it, telling people not to take the vaccine for COVID-19 because it would lead to death. Very dramatic. Ken has also supplied me with this interesting bit of information, and this comes to us from the Federal Trade Commission in the United States, protecting America's consumers, it says, and dated the 15th of April 2021. In first action under COVID-19 Consumer Protection Act, FTC seeks monetary penalties for deceptive marketing of purported coronavirus treatments. Agency charges chiropractor with violating new COVID-19 consumer protection law by deceptively marketing vitamin D and zinc products to treat or prevent COVID-19. And it says in part, the Federal Trade Commission charged a St. Louis-based chiropractor, Eric Anthony Nepute, and his company Quickwork LLC for violating the COVID-19 Consumer Protection Act and the Federal Trade Commission Act by deceptively marketing products containing vitamin D and zinc as scientifically proven to treat or prevent COVID-19. This is the first case the FTC has brought under the new law. In a federal complaint filed by the U.S. Department of Justice on the FTC's behalf, the Commission is asking the court to exercise a provision of the new law to impose monetary penalties on Nepute and Quickwork and to grant a preliminary injunction against the defendants. According to the complaint, the defendants marketed the vitamin D and zinc products under the brand name Wellness Warrior and claimed that they were as or more effective than vaccines that are currently available. In addition to monetary penalties, the complainant seeks to bar the defendants from making such health claims unless they are true and can be substantiated by competent and reliable scientific evidence. The Commission also seeks to bar the defendants from falsely claiming to have scientific evidence about the effects of vitamin D and zinc on COVID-19. And there is more to read on this page, which I will link to in the show notes. But later on it goes on to say, Congress passed the COVID-19 Consumer Protection Act in 2020, making it illegal under the FTC Act to engage in deceptive marketing related to the treatment, cure, prevention, mitigation, or diagnosis of COVID-19 or any government benefit related to COVID-19. The law also authorizes the FTC to sink civil monetary penalties for first-time violations, a remedy not normally available under the FTC Act. Now, I imagine this will not be the last time we hear about such action being taken by the Federal Trade Commission. There would be, I would think, thousands of cases of individuals or companies making fraudulent or deceptive claims about treatments for COVID-19. There certainly has been in Australia, with the most memorable case being that of Pete Evans, the former celebrity chef who was promoting a magic box of flashing lights to help mitigate COVID-19. Although in some respect, many of us are certainly learning to live with what they used to call the new normal. When we look to countries like India, where thousands upon thousands of people are dying every week, it's hardly anything that we can afford to be complacent about. So, well done, Federal Trade Commission. I hope there are more prosecutions in the future.
G'day, this is Dr. Karl Kruszinski, proud to be a skeptic, and you can find out more about me at drkarl.com and get lots of free stuff there as well.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. With Tim Mendham, the editor and the chief executive officer. No, you're not. What are you?
Executive officer. I'm not chief of anybody, mate.
Not chief. All right. I'm with, if we can keep a straight face, I'm with Tim Mendham, the editor of the Skeptic magazine. What's this? What's this?
No,
the horses?
Having fun. Yeah, carry on.
The editor of this.
Start again.
We're not going to start again. We're trying to record the Book of Tim, but we have discovered that even up here in where Tim lives in the back of nowhere, planes and birds and cars are coming by frequently. Tim, you're the editor of the magazine The Skeptic from Australian Skeptics. You're the executive officer of Australian Skeptics Inc. What's coming up? What can people expect in the next issue of the magazine?
Richard, I'm glad you asked me that.
I think you're glad you asked me. Not like we rehearsed it.
Yes, I can. We've got a big feature on a topic which crops up all the time in skeptical circles. People look at what people believe, whether it's from flying saucers and astrology to anti-vaxxers or all the ideas that and the claims they make. But a key issue for skeptics is, why do they believe it?
Yeah.
And actually, there are probably as many reasons as there are believers.
But that's anomalistic psychology, isn't it?
It's in a way, yes, people believing, yes. It's
why people believe these things.
Yeah, why people believe those things. And it is a big topic, and although, frankly, not enough people are covering it in the paranormal area. You know, people, psychologists and things always talk about why people believe, but it's in the skeptical fraternity, it's a key topic, but it's not covered enough.
But the believer would say they believe in this because it's true.
Yeah, but there's various reasons why other people, more independent researchers, might say, why do you believe it's true?
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of things. Obviously, there's political reasons, there's religious reasons, there's conspiracy reasons, and there's desire reasons, and all sorts of things why people cotton on to particular things which we might regard as unsubstantiated, right? Which obviously they don't. And
that's right.
That's good. Fine.
The cars going by don't bother me at all because this is an interview and I'm just chatting to you. It's not like we're recording anything important.
Oh, right. Okay. Put the rolls away. But basically, therefore, we've got a feature in the next issue, which is the June 2021 issue of the magazine, devoted to why people believe, rather than necessarily what they believe. And we talk to legal experts, we talk to psychologists, we talk to scientists and all sorts of different people about what they think, what they might suggest are the reasons that people believe. And as we say, for a specific belief, apart from the people who are the promoters, who we would suggest have different motivations to the believers, the followers.
They don't necessarily have the same motivations.
Yes.
I know where you're coming from.
Yes. There might be personal aggrandizement, or for some it's money.
Money.
Yes, I think only suggestion of these things. We're not saying, but I'm sure there are elements that are different to the followers, who follow their prognostications. So, and that's some of the stuff we're covering. That's probably going to be a decent sized part of the magazine. But we're also looking at some of those topics which are top of mind, like the Oxymetrical Society.
Oh, top of mind.
Absolutely top of mind.
Every day.
People phone me up and say, tell me about the Oxymetrical Society, which is a fairly short-lived organisation from Sydney University.
Oh, yeah.
Which looked at oxoplasm. No, so oxyplasm.
Oxyplasm?
No, oxoplasm.
What?
Oxoplasm is perhaps...
There's one now.
That's one. That's an oxoplasm going past.
Yes.
Oxoplasm might be more generally referred to by its technical term, which is bullshit. And this was a bunch of academics from Sydney Uni who were investigating claims of bullshit.
Oh,
right.
okay.
So, and it wasn't that long, but it was a bit of a fun thing, basically, I think. So, as you say, everybody's knocking on your door asking about the Oxymetrical Society. We're looking at a few other things as well. We're looking at, and I know that you interviewed these people. Actually, we're running the interview by you of two authors of a book about crystals, crystal therapy. Very interesting. We also review that book, and we do a regular sort of book reviews, and sometimes new books, and sometimes we look at classic books.
Yep.
And in the past, we've looked at Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World, and we've looked at James Randi's Flim Flam, and Joe Nichols' what's it called? On the Shroud of Turin, actually. Inquest on the Shroud of Turin.
Right.
So books like that. But this time we're looking at a book which is not quite as old, but we still regard it as a bit of a classic, which is Trick or Treatment.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's about 10 years back.
Yeah, 2009. Yeah. And that's, of course, by Simon Singh and Edzard Ernst.
Yes.
And from the very fact that it looks at a whole range of different treatments, alternative treatments, and assesses them all, and looks at scientific method and all various things like that, is really, really regarded as one of the books you should have in your library.
Now, the very first issue of The Skeptic, which came out in 1981, so this is the 40th year.
41st year now. Sorry to be pedantic.
What? Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. 41st year. Haven't completed the 41st year.
Right.
But we're into the 41st year. Sorry.
Nevertheless.
Okay, carry on, Richard, what you were saying. It's very interesting.
Volume 1, number 1, came out in 1981, 40 years ago. And I don't have it in front of me here. I know it's all on the website. You can download. That's got a big... the very first issue is a tabloid, isn't it?
That's right. 4 pages.
4 pages with a picture of James Randi on the cover. And I can't remember what time of year that came out.
There were only 3 issues
in that first year.
It would have come in about March or something like that, actually. As I said, it was actually properly typeset. It looked like a newspaper, but a very thin one.
Yeah.
Because it's really one large sheet of paper folded over.
Yes.
Right, so it's 4 pages. And the interesting thing then is that a lot of the stuff was classic skepticism that we looked at then. In those days, there was the psychics and there was the predictions and that sort of stuff, including someone who predicted that Perth was going to be wiped out by a tidal wave.
That's right.
Which it never was, surprisingly.
Not yet.
But it also had, as far as the field of alt-med in the trick or treatment deals with, there was only one story on medicine and health in that particular little issue, and that was on psychic surgery.
Yes.
right? There was nothing about acupuncture or anti-vaccination or
psychics,
all the things that
well, anti-vaccination wasn't a thing 40 years ago, was it?
There was occasional things. Yeah, there were people who were objecting to polio.
But there wasn't a dedicated mob.
Not as much as there was. When smallpox vaccination first came out, of course, it caused a fuss amongst a lot of people. George Bernard Shaw regarded it as a travesty, as a danger. Yeah, and there were people who were suggesting you were going to turn into cows, etc., because it came from cowpox, right? They used the cowpox virus. So there are all these little drawings at the time of people turning into cows.
Good grief.
But yeah, I mean, the people, I think around the 50s, and then people realised, the benefits of polio vaccine and all the other. And since then, there's been a lot more vaccines developed. And at the same time as they develop, the diseases go down in number, and people don't think of them as a danger, and therefore the vaccines are themselves unwarranted. That's the anti-vaccination movement.
Yeah.
But yeah, not as organised as it is now, or in some cases actually pretty disorganised. But so I mean, the skeptic movement has changed over the years.
Yeah. Oh well, under that first issue, Doris Stokes, wrong. James Randi doing classical skepticism.
Yeah.
Yes, tidal wave not hitting Perth. I mean, those things are still floating about, but yeah,
they come and they go. I mean, psychics are still around making predictions. You probably don't know this, but psychics are still making a lot of predictions in women's magazines. Yeah, it's quite amazing actually. I mean, there's bound to be some poor sod who's going to collect them all and comment on them. But yeah, I don't know anyone who would actually think of doing
foolish enough to do that. Foolhardy enough to do that.
Yeah, I hope I never get near such a
person. That's right. Now, next week, folks, on the Skeptic Zone, we're restarting the next block of the Book of Tim, who's arriving in that plane right now. There's another one. And we're looking at the cycle of life over the next month or so.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's something which I write.
Yes, you do.
And it takes a lot of work.
Yes,
right?
It does.
It's a huge amount of effort.
Yeah. Beautifully typeset. I have a copy right here.
Gloriously typeset. As is all the magazine, actually.
Yes,
beautifully laid out by our in-house design team.
Yes, very good.
Right. It's about how, you start off with a particular fact, and then you, through various connections, sometimes tenuous.
This is ridiculous.
That's me landing again.
That's you landing again.
It's a UFO.
It's a UFO.
By helicopter.
That's low.
Yeah, they're looking for someone. Through links from one story to the next. It's often pretty tenuous sometimes. The link.
It is a bit, but it's very entertaining.
It's highly entertaining.
And listeners, you roll.
And I enjoy doing that, putting that together, actually. Sometimes I'm amazed at how I can actually think in my own head, that must be connected to this.
Look for something.
It's a mess in there. I wouldn't go there. It's very dark. Right? But I mean, you do. When you're writing it, you have to think, what might that connect to?
Yeah.
And you have all these ideas in your head.
But it works somehow, and you get back to the beginning.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's amazingly put together. I wish I knew who did it.
The cycle of life, it's, the things that go around.
That's the opposite of someone who might collect psychic predictions, right? Which is sort of like sad.
Very sad.
But we're doing this is very interesting. But yes, we like... a lot of people say they like the what goes around section, actually.
It's a nice segment. Now, how can listeners, if they feel so inclined, how can they... maybe help or get ideas to you for segments and articles and reports and things for the magazine?
I would love ideas and thoughts and articles and letters and forum pieces, which are sort of long letters of outraged opinion. Even book reviews and that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Best thing to do is contact me first to make sure we haven't done it already.
Yes.
But they can write to me at editor@skeptics.com.au.
Yep.
And just say, hi, I can write. And I'd like to write about this for the Skeptic magazine.
This is the topic. What do you think?
This is the topic. Say one sentence summary, and I say that sounds interesting. And we pay everybody in round figures.
Very round
figures. Little round circles.
In fact, I seem to contribute quite a bit to the magazine over the years. And folks, I can promise you, every time I contribute, I get a multiplication of the last.
That's
paycheck, don't I?
But there is inflation on this.
Zero times zero.
Yes, I know. We're extremely generous. We are run on the smell of an oily rag, so and really so.
Have I written anything for the next issue? Oh, it's the interview I did. I think.
The interview you did. Yes, I'm taking that because sort of we have this. Parasitic sort of relationship between the Skeptic magazine and the Skeptic Zone.
We do,
Yes, we feed off each other like leeches. Really.
I supply you with stories and you supply me with the stories.
That's exactly right. See, but that's the way the skeptical community works, right? I think we're all in this together, right? We all should be chipping in and helping each other out. And I think that's part of the nice thing about the Skeptics group, especially in Australia.
In Australia, I think it works very well.
Skeptics in Australia are a weird bunch, but they like to have a bit of fun. So if you haven't been along to a Skeptics meeting, whether you're in Sydney or Melbourne or wherever, look up the magazine.
Yeah.
We have a list of organisations there and when they hold meetings.
Yeah.
And I say go along.
Go along. We were that close to going along last week, weren't we?
Well, we've had online meetings in Sydney.
Ever since the pandemic, we've had online Skeptics in the pub, but last week we were within hours of turning up at the pub. And then the government put in new restrictions.
Yeah, I know. It was very disappointing.
Very
actually.
disappointing.
Very disappointing indeed. Especially for our speaker who'd flown in from the US just for that particular
just for
thing.
that. Spent 2 weeks in quarantine.
Poor guy. But yeah, I mean, sort of actually most of the groups are now returning to face-to-face.
Yeah.
I mean, for last year, they were largely doing it, they were streaming in whatever sort of platform.
Which is all very well, but I'm looking forward to getting back.
I'm looking forward to having a beer.
Me too. I haven't had a beer in a year.
I used to watch it online and have a beer in front of me, actually. I had my little steak and chips in a plate and my beer.
Well, for the last year, I've been the one hosting it, so I really couldn't have a beer next to me because, you have a couple of beers and your hosting ability goes out the door.
Never stopped me. I think I improve.
All right, well, there you are, folks. That's coming up in the next issue of The Skeptic, the journal from Australian Skeptics. And again, just go to skeptics.com.au. You can download all the past issues, bar the last four.
We keep the last four exclusive for our subscribers.
Yeah, we do. Subscribe and get the latest issue delivered to your inbox or physically in your letterbox.
Hard copy or digital.
That's it. Thank you, Tim.
Well, that filled up 10 minutes of rubbish.
Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you could listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
Once again, it's time to look into the pages of archives of digitised newspapers, periodicals, journals, and so on in the section we call Trove, although in recent weeks we've been looking at US newspapers as opposed to Australian newspapers, and we're continuing this week with a revisiting of a theme, or a general theme we covered some months ago, that of UFOs, but we're looking at a subsection of UFO reports. This is to do with alien abductions. Now, I've never abducted an alien myself, but people do claim they have been abducted by aliens. And so, out of the many reports I've discovered, I've chosen 3. And the first one comes from 1996 from the Chronicle. And I think this was probably a syndicated piece anyway, because I saw it pop up various times. And it's a review. Aliens, crippled by style. Steve Fogarty, The Chronicle Telegram. And this is in the entertainment section, and it's a review of a documentary. Making use of lots of crazily angled fuzzy images and stock pictures of big-headed aliens with huge black eyes, abducted by aliens, obviously wants to convey the unearthly experience of being taken captive by beings from somewhere else. But all those arty visuals may do is make you feel like you've just come off an all-night bender. The roughly 80-minute program, packaged in a 2-hour time block, is produced and directed by Kurt Wolfinger and Dana Ray Warren, the pair that gave us Moonshot a Peabody-winning documentary on the ill-fated mission of Apollo 13 that also aired on TBS. Abducted by Aliens is the latest in the TBS original documentary series. But with the alien invasion blockbuster Independence Day still fresh in our minds, it plays more like a pumped-up docudrama than a straight-on examination of 6 people whose lives have forever been changed by purported encounters with beings from other worlds. This is more a fault of the jazzed-up visuals that include images seemingly borrowed from the Twilight Zone, such as repeated shots of clocks that appear to be melting. Far less gimmicky and straightforward are the 3 stories the program focuses on. These include Jack and Jim Viner, identical twins who claim to have been abducted and examined by aliens while on a fishing trip. Claire Holcomb and Diana Graves, 2 women whose seemingly dissimilar lives are actually interwoven with memories of a shared alien abduction. Fred Wilson, an inspiring stand-up comic whose career was nearly destroyed following his abduction experience en route to a comedy gig one night in Vermont. Cutting back and forth between segments, the program reinforces some of the classic elements of UFO sightings and abductions, such as sightings of bright lights and hovering objects, paralysis of abductees during their experience, and medical examinations that include extraction of bodily fluids, and in the case of the 2 women, impregnation by the aliens. Now, the major themes reiterated by all 5 are the elements of missing time and suppressed memory. Missing time is the phenomena of being unable to account for periods of time during which the victims recall being at one point prior to their experience and finding themselves miles away with no explanation of how they got from one point to the other. Suppressed memory is the seeming inability of abductees to remember their experiences in any detail. Hypnosis has been used extensively to try and unlock such memories from the subconscious. Viewers can feel empathy for the abductees' supposedly horrendous experiences, such as when Graves tearfully says, "There is no treatment for this, you just survive it." Or Wilson wishing his nightmarish ordeal could be chalked up to an organic brain disorder, because at least then the world would be safe. But other details of the abductees' experiences are pretty hard to swallow, such as when Jim and Jack Viner talk of being pulled from their boyhood beds by invisible beings and having their eyes plucked out, examined, and returned to their bodies by the aliens during their adult abduction. Or Graves talking about going to bed with shaved legs and waking up the next morning with hair all over them. The most chilling moments of Abducted by Aliens comes when the 5 people profiled expressed the emotional anguish of not being believed by family and friends. One of the documentary's most ironic and funnier moments comes when the Viners confess that their own mother didn't believe their story until she saw them telling it on the David Letterman show. It took TV to legitimize and validate their ordeal for their own mother. Don't expect Abducted by Aliens to do the same. Abducted by Aliens debuts Sunday at 9 p.m. on TBS. It repeats at 1 a.m. Monday. I don't think I've seen that documentary. Maybe it's floating around YouTube or something. The next item comes to us from 1997, The Orange Leader, dated the 2nd of April. Alien policy dropped. London, The Associated Press. The company that insured the 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult against abduction by aliens said today it stopped writing alien-related policies after the group's mass suicide. The cult members paid $1,000 on October 10 for a policy that covered up to 50 members and would pay out $1 million per person for abduction, impregnation, or death caused by aliens. Because of the manipulation of malevolent third parties, innocent lives were wrecked. Managing Director of the Goodfellow Rebecca Ingram's Pearson Insurance Company said today, "I am deeply shocked and saddened, and that's why we're withdrawing from the alien abduction insurance market. We don't wish to contribute to a repetition of the Heaven's Gate deaths." He said the group discovered his company provided alien abduction insurance via the internet. The beneficiary of the policy was the Society of Heaven's Gate, said Burgess. He said the cult had paid the premium and the annual policy remains in force until October 9. They would have to prove they were abducted, he added. Last summer, the company added alien abduction insurance to the unusual policies it covers, which Burgess said accounted for 10% of its overall business. Heaven's Gate was one of the 4,000 policyholders worldwide who bought alien abduction insurance, he said, adding that Britain and the United States were the biggest markets. The policies against alien abductions will not be renewed when they lapse, Burgess said, but the company continues to offer unusual policies. We insure virgins against immaculate conception, prostitutes against loss of earnings from headache and backache, conversion to a werewolf or vampire, death or serious injury through paranormal activity, and unfaithful husbands against having their penis cut off, he said. It's a funny note to end that report on, but certainly the Heaven's Gate cult was no laughing matter. I remember it very well at the time. Innocent people duped into thinking that they would be swept away by UFOs visiting the Earth, and sadly dying in the process by, if I remember correctly, poison. And that tragic story also is reflected in the next item I have here. This comes from 1997, April the 13th. Arlington Heights Daily Herald, suburban Chicago. Cult puts UFO conference in new light. Gathering now object of ridicule. Associated Press. Eureka Springs, Arkansas. For a group that shares stories about being sucked out of cars by aliens or losing stock to laser beams, the uninvited visitors who believed they would reach the afterlife in a UFO were just too weird. When members of the Heaven's Gate cult tried to join discussions at the annual Ozark UFO conference 3 years ago, they were permitted only to drop off literature. No theological debates were tolerated. The conference attracts a crowd more interested in largely nuts and bolts issues, UFO sightings, and tales of how I got abducted by aliens in a big spaceship and I'm here to tell my story. This year, they can't avoid the subject of Heaven's Gate and its members' mass suicides. I remember them showing up talking about Jesus and UFOs, says Tabby Reynolds, a 33-year-old from Tulsa, Oklahoma. These cult people started arguing with my friend. They also made weird chirping noises. They were really weird. 39 members of Heaven's Gate cult killed themselves over a series of days in late March in a Southern Californian mansion, believing they would be taken to eternal peace on the UFO trailing behind the Hale-Bopp comet. At the Ozarks conference, UFOs are valued only as proof of extraterrestrial life, not as transportation to eternal life. That whole Heaven's Gate incident has made a conference like this the object of ridicule, says Lou Farish, coordinator of the 9th Annual Ozark UFO Conference. The difference is they integrated UFOs into a set belief system. We're all individuals here with individual minds. About 400 people attended the weekend conference at this resort town in the Ozark Mountains. I've seen enough about UFOs and extraterrestrials to know that the phenomenon of UFOs goes beyond hallucination and hoaxes, said 48-year-old Gary Massey of Paris, Texas, who runs the Lone Star Bar at the conference. Vendors peddled alien statues, books on extraterrestrials, keychains and flying saucer mugs, while speakers like psychologist Robert Stone of Pensacola, Florida, tried to convince crowds of the intangible. Stone claims a group of peaceful aliens took him aboard a spaceship in 1991. A few people have already come up to me to tell me that they've had similar experiences, Stone said. I can understand why some people don't believe in this, but if there were this many witnesses in a court of law, someone would be convicted. Dozens of people bought pictures of disc-shaped objects they say are flying saucers. Not everyone accepted them at face value. At least 1/3 of all these photographs are fakes, and I could prove it, says Bob Shell, editor of Shutterbug, a photography magazine. It's amazing what they can do with pictures. These things could be UFOs, but I'm one of the skeptics. Dr. John Carpenter, who operates a psychiatric practice in Springfield, Missouri, came to the conference to speak about his research. He has counselled more than 120 people who claim to have been abducted by aliens. Typically, people find themselves being floated off in a blue, iridescent moonlight, says Carpenter. I try to trick people to see if they are making it up, but I have had 17 cases of people who have been abducted together, and during hypnotherapy they remember the same things. It's almost embarrassing to say. And accompanying the item, there's a black and white image of a blow-up alien and a book or a DVD. It's hard to tell. It's a bit fuzzy. It says UFO... something about UFOs, I can't quite tell. And people milling around at the vendor's table with the caption, visitors attending the 9th annual Ozark UFO conference look over items for sale relating to unidentified flying objects on Friday at Eureka Springs, Arkansas. So, that was just 3 of the many returns when we run searches for abductions and UFOs and things like that. And it did bring back into focus all these years later the Heaven's Gate cult. And just quickly to refresh your memory, and mine too, from Wikipedia, Heaven's Gate, religious group. Heaven's Gate was an American new religious movement often described as a cult. It was founded in 1974 and led by Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite, known within the movement as Ty and Do, respectively. Nettles and Applewhite first met in 1972 and went on a journey of spiritual discovery, identifying themselves as the 2 witnesses of revelation, attracting a following of several hundred people in the mid-1970s. In 1976, the group stopped recruiting and instituted a monastic lifestyle. It goes on to say that the religion is being described as a UFO religion. The central belief of the group was that followers could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrial beings by rejecting their human nature, and they would ascend to heaven, referred to as the next level, or the evolutionary level above human. But the crux of this is on March 26, 1997, deputies of the San Diego Sheriff's County Department discovered the bodies of 38 active members of the group, including that of Applewhite, in a house in San Diego, in the San Diego suburb of Rancho Santa Fe. They had participated in a mass suicide, a coordinated series of ritual suicides, coinciding with the closest approach of the comet Hale-Bopp. Just before the mass suicide, the group's website was updated with the message, Hale-Bopp brings closure to Heaven's Gate. Our 22 years of classroom here on planet Earth is finally coming to conclusion. Graduation from the human evolutionary level. We are happily prepared to leave this world and go with Ty's crew. And the item here on Wiki is lengthy indeed. It goes on and on, but that's the crux of it. People who were duped into believing that something that they thought was following the Hale-Bopp comet was actually a UFO to take them, to the next level. So sometimes, yes, UFO stories are funny and interesting and fun to investigate, and part of our culture for a long time, but certainly there is a dark side too. But don't forget, no matter where you are in the world, you too may well have access to online newspapers and so on. I think anybody can go to trove.nla.gov.au to look at Australian newspapers and so on. And I recommend you do it. You never know what you'll find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you to the new Patreons that have just come on board in the last week, chipping in to help out the Skeptic Zone. And you can do that too by visiting skepticzone.tv and clicking the Patreon link. While you're there, scroll to the bottom of the page and you can check out my origami photographs for sale. There's a few freebies for you to download and print out at high quality, or you can check out the gallery of 50 more up on a website called Pickfair, where you can buy those prints or those digital copies, which helps support the Skeptic Zone. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello to the afterthoughts, the people who keep listening after the music ends, or happen to keep listening by accident because you didn't turn off the podcast. Happens sometimes. People get a surprise. I like this part of the show because I don't care if there are birds or noises or dogs or whatever outside the studio. This is where I roll a die 3 times. Where's my Skeptic Zone notepad? Here it is. Let's see. Oops, and a Skeptic Zone pencil. Right. I'm going to roll this 10-sided die 3 times in my dice rolling machine. Thank you to Greg Doré from the Bay Area who gave me that as a present. It's sort of like a wheat silo or a wheat elevator. And there's the plane, which I don't care about. Anyway, we're going to roll this die 3 times. You guess, you use your psychic power or whatever you wish to see if you can predict the number. Here it comes. First number out of 10. 3. Okay. 3. Next number coming up. Predict away. 9. And the last number. It's a nice translucent gold colour, yellow coloured die. Last number is 10. There you go. 3, 9 and 10. And I'll use a blue die now for the supplementary. 3. How did you do? How did you go this week?